some people were starting to talk about collective presencing. Have you seen collective? Have you heard collective? Do you know what it's? Do you know RIA? Do you know RIA's book? So I found it on the Stoa, and I dropped into one of the sessions, and there was something very authentic about RIA. I started to read the book soon after my first exposure, and I just felt like there was something real. I believed what she was saying.
What I found through Ria's book was a very nuanced and precise description of how I navigate the world. And I haven't found so many that word it in a very worldly way, if I would say so, like a down-to-earth way. So for me, at least, I just speak for myself. It really it's really like, it was almost like going through body and going through the sensing experience and getting words on it, instead of going through head and concept and putting words on how I sense and navigate, like the inner knowing and the subtlety. So there was like a language, almost like
I got that too when I was reading Ria's book, because soon after I actually was in a session, not just watching it on YouTube, but in a session, picked up the book, and I just gobbled it for about 5 or 6 days. You know, it's a pretty thick book, and it just felt so natural. It felt like I understood everything that was going on. And it just, the way it was put together, it was kind of had this kind of circular quality. It was like this weave going through, and I just felt like, wow, there's something here, but I didn't know.
I was having intersubjective space experiences elsewhere, but there was no praxis framework around it. They were just happening randomly, and I was experiencing them, and I was like, I don't know what this is, but I know it's important. And then I saw Ria and read Ria's book and listened, and first her energy, I was like, lock, like that was like you. And then secondly, when I read the book, I was like, oh, there's a framework. And then I took the deep dive, and I was like, yeah, right, that's what it is. She's explained, she's unfolded it somehow. Like origami, she's like flattened out the origami paper, you know, and said like, this is the instruction manual for how to do it, to how to fold it. And I was like, oh shit, someone did it.
I started going to, like, one of the sessions that really, really gripped me was Budina Roy's Hollow series. And it was one of those sessions that I just stumbled upon. It was like her first one. And the experience of it can only be described as like creatively psychoactive. Like, it felt like, it's like funny. I downloaded all our slide decks and I still go back to them sometimes, but the experience and felt sense of it was like a homecoming to an alien planet. It was very strange. And I remember that after the session finished, I was filled with so much energy kind of moving through my body that I was physically vibrating with it, but I didn't know, like, I had no skillfulness around what that meant. And without even thinking about it, I just noticed on the Stoa schedule that there was something called collective presencing that was happening right after. And I was like, I'm just gonna go to this because I was drawn to the words collective presencing. And I just like signed up, clicked, and went straight from the Bonnie Roy session into collective presencing. And it actually felt like it was like I was pouring into whatever that space was, kind of utterly unprepared, with no sense of what I was getting myself into. Yeah, it was undeniably transformative in a way that is, it's like I can tell little stories about how it's made me braver to speak, or like the way that it's allowed me to really kind of sense into energy and what it means to kind of, to know like the subtlety of different frequencies. Like, I think there's like these ways in which I can try to express the inexpressible, but I think ultimately it is like it woke up a very latent capacity that has always been here.
There was a phrase that I heard early on in CP, and it's not really in the book, I don't think, and it's not really necessarily one of the principles, but I think someone just said it in a session, and they said, oh, it's like a place where I get to practice being myself. And I heard that. When I heard that, I was like, wow, there isn't so few places in the world where I can actually practice being myself really fully, completely, and totally, you know, and I've become more myself as a consequence of practicing being myself in those spaces. And yet it's not really my self that I recognize as myself, it's my essential self. There's something about the shared group experience. So I like blow out into the collective, but the bit that's left of me is even more essentially me than if I'm just an individual human like that.
There is something with collective processing around the bridge between the interpersonal and intersubjective that I see is quite like specific to be collective processing.
Completely see it as a contemplative practice, and I don't really see the dialogue as being something special, and yet that's what creates this kind of connection between the interpersonal and the I'll say transcendental, but we're calling it intersubjective, and that sense of, because intersubjective spaces can just seem like they're made up. I mean, anybody can say anything about, you know, I'm sensing glue in this space, and all of a sudden everybody looks around and wonders where the glue is and that kind of thing. But to actually have people learning together and feeling and sensing in and being able to be honest. And that, I think that was Ria's point in the piece that she wrote. She says, you know, collective presencing is about having an authentic dialogue. And this authentic dialogue is what prepares us for being able to be with creation. And, you know, just like, oh, is that what I've been doing for 2 years?
And there's something about CP, which there's a natural, organic, unmediated gear system that self-regulates in the energy of the space. And you know, when you drop down into like, oh, we're in interpersonal dialogue now. Oh, okay, it moves like that. And when there's coherence, it doesn't always need to be coherence in fifth gear. There can be coherence actually at all the different levels. Somebody goes, I'm in a trigger, I need the support of the group. You know, it's like, and everybody drops down like that. And that's quite something.
I've done circling before. So something that I did was circling when I was at Willow for 3 months, and we did a lot of circling, and that's like an interpersonal, I guess, practice perhaps. And I found it difficult in a lot of ways, and also very healing in other ways. But something that always felt like I was always hitting up the edge of something was not being able to speak to what is here outside. It's like, what is also here beyond just like the 8 of us around a circle. And I feel like it's like that way of really relating to mystery that is more than human, that begins to kind of sense into, like, when someone said like intersubjective, for me, the word is always like, the word that comes alive is always transsubjective. And I think there's like this quality of intersubjective is kind of the field, but sometimes like transsubjective is like the aliveness of the subjectivity that is the middle that we're relating to. It's like something that's both like beyond us and also constitutive of us.
What I also notice in collective processing is that expression that it goes beyond the words is very welcome, and so there is like a more full expression of human expression, and I see that as very valuable as well. Because I have a that's a wild and untamed and crazy, like the more animal primal part of us wants to come back into the room in the intersubjective spaces. that I do also receive that lack in collective processing, the lack of the distinctions, the lack of the words, the lack of the sometimes the distinction and the nuances that can also unlock and evoke and invoke for something else or something more. But sometimes that's a perspective I look at, and I'm curious on that, because I can do see in other spaces that they have too much of it. So it actually takes away the lived experience of the unfolding of what happens, like, and allowing every single one of them to really word their own experience and hopefully the actually shared experience. But that for me is also a difference with collective processing that I sometimes receive, and I don't say that this is the truth in any way, but that's my experience coming in, that sometimes it's almost like it becomes personal and interpersonal interpretations. So sometimes I can miss actually the clarity that I receive in Ria's book.
I'm very skeptical. I tend to distrust authority figures, particularly male authority figures. But then I also had in some ways, not such a good experience with one of the people I discussed earlier. The teacher can have some marvelous skills, marvelous abilities, can be attractive, can be, sensational with their language, can have extraordinary psychic abilities, all that stuff. But if the people around are not growing, it becomes really obvious. And that has nothing to do with the numbers. I mean, numbers can be incredible, off the chart. It has to do with that integration quality, and sort of following my nose, but also looking for where it is that it's becoming a little maybe phony or fraudulent or too leader directed. That's another thing. There was nothing about Ria that looked like she wanted to be an apostle or some kind of leader or guru. And that was very attractive to me. And I even tested her on it several times because I hadn't been around somebody like that before. I don't feel like someone's telling me to believe in God or telling me not to believe in God, or to believe in trees, or to believe in stars, or whatever. It feels like it's really open cosmologically, and yeah, the system's really open, and there's a freedom that's being taught and self-taught and co-regulated by all of us about being more free, being more authentic. I saw changes in my relationships.
Like, I'm a very, very secular, I would say, like kind of skeptically religious person, or skeptical of religion and belief kind of person. But there's this new way of relating to the beyond, or to the thou, or to source and spirit and soul, that just comes through this practice in a way that feels incredibly authentic.
It's like I've been in CP spaces where I've been like, I was there last Friday, I said it, I was like, I feel like I'm in some kind of ersatz self-development class 101. Like, fuck this, I'm not here for this. I could get, like, I get that at the bar in the local corner, and I'm not afraid to say that to the middle. And I've been in CP sessions where I've been like, oh my God, this is a mystical experience. I'm having a mystical experience. I'm having a mystical experience.
And I think that is like the trustworthiness as well for me around collective presencing, especially when it begins to touch into what you might describe as like more esoteric or spiritual dimensions that like would kind of contract me or like kind of bring up like, oh, how do I know how to trust this? And then there's something about it that's like, it's not trusting like word, it's trusting like quality of sensation in my body and quality of relationship and quality of, oh, like something like my heart's like beating faster, or I'm feeling like that longing. And yeah, just like this practice of coming back to trust something that's innately part of my own body.
And I think the three of you have said something really important. It just comes here. I think all the three of you have mentioned in different way being skeptical, and you all stayed. That says something.
It's not a kumbaya thing at all. Like if anything, if everyone started agreeing too much, I'd be like, I think I'm out. And yet when I experienced collective presencing, it felt like it blew any process that I had encountered before out of the water, just in terms of the way, like, I mean, it felt closer to art making in a lot of ways, where there's this kind of like, you become in service to, like, there is this kind of, you're still present, but there's this awareness of you're in service to something that is an emergent subjectivity. It's like there's something that's in the middle that is more than and different from the sum of the parts. And there is this way in which, like, that's what like a really, even when it was kind of much more focused around collective presencing, it felt like there was this quality of, oh, there's something in the middle that we're actually kind of swirling around together. So whatever I'm feeding into the middle isn't simply like a dump. It's actually kind of something is being pulled out of me to some extent as the thing that is attracted to whatever is being called forth. And I find that process, it's like, what is that strange attractor that we call the center and the middle, that is both something that we are in this collective process of discovering and creating at the same time. It's like, and I feel like that discovery creation dichotomy feels really real in collective presencing, where it both feels like it's almost like an excavation, or like we're finding something that's already there, like we're kind of dusting off something that's beneath the ground. And yet we're also like, every single person who's showing up and who's sharing to the center is also actively creating it. And just to kind of compare it to the way that I would show up in another kind of group environment, would be that in kind of like, I guess, a traditional, we're trying to innovate together, everyone bring in their perspectives as diverse stakeholders. There's still this sense of, I need to show up and bring my piece to the whole. Like, it's kind of, I don't know why, but there's this way in which there's like a preconception of who you think you're supposed to be and what you believe you have to bring. So everything has this filter that is like like you determine from the past who you think you should be in the future, essentially. So you almost live out a projection of who you're supposed to become. And I find that, like, for me, collective presencing is this active, like, because it kind of like brings you right down to what is here right now. And when you speak, like when I speak in collective presencing, I don't know what I'm about to say. It is kind of like this, it's like pouring out of me like a waterfall, and I'm just following the flow of whatever it is. I am actually just completely present with the becoming of the now. It is so, and that's like the quality of surprise that happens in every collective presencing. Like, I can never get bored. It kind of brings forth like the aliveness of the cosmos It's like, oh, there is no, like, anything that we believe is, I guess, like almost like structured in linear time, anything that we believe that we know has this innate mystery and aliveness to it that's like right here. There's like this way in which it's actually kind of like a still point of a turning world. It's like, or the eye of a storm, where there's so much energy that's moving and kind of bumping up against one another that there's actually like a stillness that's held through all of that tension. And that for me is actually creative tension, like that comes from polarities that meet. But it's like an interesting thing. There's like a quality of wholeness that isn't, we're meeting and then dissolving into one, and now we're like part of the same we. Like, I think any kind of we space that doesn't hold simultaneously, kind of, I guess in that, I don't know what non-dual actually means. I'm not a non-dual person, but my sense of it is there's like the holding of the distinctions and the particularities and the, oh, you're other, and yet we're like both attracted and kind of like unable to fully kind of meet and become one. Like there's like that is creative tension to me.
I do receive that collective processing holds something very valuable, and by Ria, by being the source keeper, because she is a woman and she is deeply connected to the feminine, the universal principle of the feminine. And what has keep showing up the last 2 weeks is a deeper understanding that the feminine principle women are grounding civilization and has always done. So it's almost like it's like a collective processing. What if they hold a possibly for future just grounding civilization, grounding the future, grounding the civilization into the future, whatever that means, but it means something. Yeah, and I think that's also is a contribution that collective processing it's coming. It is so grounding, grounded. It's grounded, like both in like using words as yeah, it's very grounded.
Really feel the quality of that groundedness, like that rootedness, that the word that had come up for me was like humility, actually, or humus of the earth, of ground, of it feels just so, it's like it's just the rootedness of the practice. It's like, I mean, it's like that way in which it stretches so deep down into what is sensually felt, that when the branches kind of reach up high and kind of go beyond the clouds, it's like, okay, like I can go up there and feel grounded and centered and safe because it is so like thickly rooted.
I think when we look back in 50 years in the future, I know when we look back, what we're doing here, I don't know how it will be described, I don't know, is part of a discontinuous movement in the way humans relate to each other. And we're not the only one, obviously. We're part of a fabric of practices that are trying to cohere, as Pamela said, like each one's got a bit of the mandala, but there's going to be a moment when we're like, oh, wow, yeah, people really are different with each other now. And I don't know what all the elements of that will be, but we'll probably be able to name them on the back of an envelope in 50 years and be like, yeah, well, this is what happened in the early 20s. This shift happened. And we're in it right now, so we just can't see it. We can't see it with enough clarity. But it has something, one of the reasons I think that the phrase speak when spoken through has such resonance when you say it to people is because it's connected to that. It's one of the central principles that's happening right now is, oh, not only do I not have to believe my thoughts, I can witness them. That's one movement of consciousness. The next one is, and I can open to this, and allow that to come through. And that's not my thinking. That's another set of channels like that. It's changing the channels.
Trembling. I'm touched by the whole conversation, and it's sort of cumulative right now. And you're wanting to make a new brew, new ways of nutrition, of nurturing, new society, new world. And you're willing to brush up against one another and talk it, feel it through as mirrors, creating more shine and more translucence. So looking to you all from the future, keep mosaicing, keep playing with the pieces and the puzzles and creating pictures and images. And we know that you're not going to get it right, but we trust that practice like collective presencing in a strange way lifts everyone, because no one or nothing is excluded from that practice. And I don't glorify collective presencing as a practice. It's rich and it shows all kinds of things, including the dirt and the grime and the imperfections and so on. But it's the impediments in collective presencing that stay alive, that sing, that that both sing into the bones and sink into the bones and the flesh, and also sing into the cosmos, into the universe.